Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Hudson and I'm here to talk to you about a book that I just got done reading called Empty. It is written by Suzanne Wen and it was published in 2008. This book is about a little town in New York called Sage Valley, and it is set 10 years into the future, which would be just 1 year from now, 2018. The main characters are a couple of high school students. Gwen, who is living with her older brother. Her mother abandoned her, and she's just kind of on her own. Her brother does quite a bit of illegal stuff, like selling things black market, and so she just kind of raises herself. The next one is a boy named Tom, and Tom is taking care of his mother. In the beginning of the book, Tom's dad dies, and his mother is not taking it very well. The last person who I consider a main character is Nikki. Nikki and her family are pretty affluent. They're pretty well off. And at the beginning of the book, the events that are happening aren't really affecting them. But as time goes on, it starts to affect them more and more. The central conflict of the book is oil shortages and climate change. Their oil supplies around the world are depleted, and the United States relies fairly heavily on, not fairly heavily, the United States is reliant on oil at the moment. The important events in the book are, the first thing is the United States goes to war with Venezuela over oil. Venezuela claims that they have a large supply of oil, and the United States wants it. But Venezuela doesn't want to give it up, so the United States attacks them. The next thing that happens is a large fight breaks out at a high school bonfire over some students from the opposing school stealing gas, and it gets really bad. That very same night, Gwen's house catches on fire because, like I said, her brother is into some black market dealings, and one of the things that he is into is gasoline, selling gasoline, because people will pay large amounts of money for gasoline to be able to drive their cars, up to like $100 a gallon. It gets pretty ridiculous. Anyways, Luke is storing gasoline in their house in milk jugs, and her house goes up in flames, which causes her to not only be running from social services, but also there's a hurricane coming and she needs to find shelter. So she goes to hide in an abandoned mine shaft. And like I said, there is a hurricane. It's not just a hurricane, not just any hurricane. It is a super hurricane. Global warming has caused huge shifts in the climate and in the weather patterns. And two hurricanes combined together, and not only does it hit the coast, but once it hits the coast, it doesn't slow down, it just keeps going. And the weather people are predicting that there will be more of this, and that won't be the last super hurricane. The thing that I think that the author wants readers to take away from this book is that climate change is happening. It's not just something that scientists made up. It's not just things that people, like, it's not a scare tactic. It's actually happening. And that there will be oil shortages. That fossil fuels are not renewable resources. And so eventually we will run out of gas and oil. Instead of trying to find more oil, I think the author is trying to drive home the fact that we need to start focusing on using renewable resources. Instead of oil, things like ethanol and solar power and wind power, because we're killing our planet using the resources that we're using currently. Burning oil is terrible for our planet. The means we use to extract the oil is terrible for our planet. The fracking causes earthquakes. It's just a domino effect. Not only is it bad for our planet to burn the oil, but it's bad for our planet to get the oil. And we have to burn oil to get the oil. So I'm going to read to you an excerpt from the book. And right before this excerpt it's right when Gwen has hidden in the mine shaft. The hurricane has just went through, and she is stuck in this mine shaft. Gwen slumped against the side of the crooked doorway of the mine shaft, built into the side of the hill, deep in Sage Valley woods. Rain poured in a sheet, the wavering image filtering through the waterfall. In front of her was nothing but a blur of brown, gold, and red with a few spots of remaining green. A terrible howl filled the black, open space behind her, bouncing off the walls and rattling the loose, decaying stone. Gwen flattened herself against the wall, terrified. It's just the wind, she told herself in a hoarse, frightened whisper. Pushing back her soaked hair, Gwen shivered. Her hand came up, bloody, when she wiped it across her face. The branch that fell before she could get inside had cut her cheek. It stung like crazy. Lowering herself to the dirt floor, Gwen let out a low chortle of grim laughter that began in her belly and traveled upward. Could things be any worse? Her situation was so bad that it was almost funny. Almost. It will end, Gwen told herself aloud. Storms end, gas shortages end, wars end. But she couldn't see an end to any of it. Maybe this was the start of something new, a world of misery without end. Outside, ancient trees fell one after the other, smashing to the ground and shaking it, crashing into one another and shattering with the force of bombs. Rain pelted the leaves of a rhythmic tattoo that made Gwen imagine knives being thrown from the heavens. She hung her head, shivering, letting the cold water from her hair and body soak the dirt floor until a mud puddle surrounded her. How had this happened to her? Why did no one love her enough to come out to find her? Pressing her forehead against her knees, she once again let her tears fall freely. She cried for the loss of the selfish woman who had been the only mother she'd ever had. She cried for the father she'd never known. She cried because Tom had never been interested in her. And she couldn't even figure out why she wanted him to care. She cried for the terrible condition of her life right then and there. She sobbed until she exhausted herself. And then she fell into a sleep that was just as sad as the waking. Gwen awakened and immediately registered a change in the quality of the light coming through the mine shaft door. It was exquisitely clear. There was no rain or wind, just this strange light. Standing, Gwen wiped her eyes and stepped out. The scene of awesome destruction, breathtaking in its ferocity, was light in the crystalline white glow. Everywhere trees were down, sometimes propped against one another, other times lying in piles of 3s and 4s on the ground. Above, the leaves had been stripped from the broken and bent remaining trees. The foliage floated in clumps in the puddles and raced along in small rivulets that had formed everywhere. It was the most beautiful thing Gwen had ever seen. Gazing upward, she saw a bright blue sky, but dark clouds hovered at its edge. It told her where she was. Gwen was standing in the eye of super hurricane Oscar Pearl. Lastly, I definitely would recommend this book. And the first one is because it's something we need to think about. We need to start thinking about taking better care of our earth. We need to start thinking about better sources of energy. The second reason I would recommend it is because it is a pretty easy read. I think that even middle schoolers could probably read it and understand it, and they might be able to take something away from it. I think it's something that anybody who can read can probably read and understand it. The third reason I would recommend this book is because it is relatable. this is all happening. And the people in this book are very real people. They're not scientists. It's not written in a language that is hard to understand or above anybody. It is pretty down to earth. And I think that it also gives some pretty good examples of things that we could do in our everyday life to put ourselves in a better situation in the future. And I hope you enjoyed my book talk, and have a good day.